Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I'm hoping to continue to get chapters from you. Don't leave us hanging. If you've already sent, say, chapters 1 through 5 or 10, I'm releasing 2 videos on some Tuesdays to read your writing from your writing prompts, and 2 videos on some Fridays to read your chapters for those of you where I have permission to read them on the channel. So basically your work will be extra videos, be fun stuff, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then I need written permission to read your chapter on the channel, as I have discussed before. Writers may send their chapters in PDF or Word document format to writewithmykela@gmail.com. Write is spelled W-R-I-T-E, and Mykela is spelled M-Y-K-E-L-A, and that will be posted at the end of the video. Please do not send Google Docs. I'm not making any promises to read every chapter sent to me on the channel, but I intend to read all the chapters sent. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. I want to remind everyone that this story is at least PG-13, meaning if you're under 13 years of age, you need your parents' permission or guidance to view this. This story is in its rough draft stage, and as we've already heard some mistakes. Some of them were kind of goofy. The title of this story is City of the Ancients, and today we are reading chapter 18. One viewer wanted to know if they could have something to read along with as I read. So if that's something you would like, then email me and ask for the chapter, and I will create a PDF of the chapter. The PDF, once created, won't receive any edits, and it may not match exactly what I read on the channel, but that's what I can offer. Let's start. Chapter 18, Castle Eastpolk. Not long after they started in the morning, they came to the northwestern edge of the castle, and they saw a river. The river came in from the ocean. When Kirsha realized this, she pulled out the map to verify what she was seeing. She then noticed that the castle was almost in line with where they were to use the orb keys. She felt perhaps the orb keys, the place for the orb keys was maybe another day north of them, and then it would be straight west. Kirsha still didn't know how they were going to get inside the mountain ring. They certainly couldn't ride in the wagon. Kieran got down off the wagon and got near the horse's head, and then Kirsha pulled out the raft and magically set it on the ground. She magically lifted them, the horse and the wagon, onto the raft. Mr. Volland started looking around immediately this time. He even leaned over the wagon to see that the raft was on dry ground. Then he gripped the wagon tight as the raft lifted up in the air and then set down in the middle of the river. Mr. Volland then looked at the direction they were floating, and this time, just before they got to the gate, he saw the castle. Before he said anything about the gate, he watched the gate rise up in the air. Then he looked behind them and watched the gate close. Kilty watched Mr. Volland's reactions. She remembered the first time they went through a gate. Then she wondered about things. The first time was the only time that Kirsha had to go through a locked door to operate the gate. But the other castles didn't seem to have that set up. Was that just because Kirsha expected there to be a door? Kilty thought perhaps that was so. Kilty had seen Kirsha's magic before Kirsha had admitted things. Now that Kirsche admitted things, Kilty had seen a lot more. But still, Kirsche had a great command over magic before she ever read a spell. As Kilty was thinking this, she looked at Kirsche. Kirsche seemed to know what she was thinking because Kirsche just shrugged her shoulders. Kilty thought, how come Mr. Valens can't see the castle until we enter? Kirsche shrugged her shoulders again. Your guess is as good as mine. However, I'm very glad the dissenters didn't seem to see it when they were chasing us. Me too, thought Kilty. We each have our orbs, so what are we looking for here? Kirsche thought for a few minutes. That's a great question. Then they focused on taking the lesser vein and docking the raft. It was early in the day, so they would put their things in rooms and then explore. When they arrived in the vestibule, Mr. Valens immediately pulled out the books on heraldry and started studying. After they explored a while, they met back in the vestibule for some lunch. Kirian had already taken care of the horse, so they just sat and nibbled. Suddenly, Kirsche burst out. So are there more ravenous Vaporis? If we go in the mountain ring, what other creatures are we going to find? I guess now that we're past the dissenters, my mind is processing our next danger. There is a myriad of dangers in the mountain ring, stated Mr. Valens. At least when the city was within the ring, there were a lot of dangerous things. Now, if they survived all this time, then they could be even more dangerous, finished Kirian. And we have to walk through all of this? Put in Kirsche. Kilty's eyes widened as she looked at Kirsche. Well, I'm working on that, stated Mr. Valens. Kirsche and Kirian raised their eyebrows and looked at Mr. Valens. Mr. Valens got up and walked around some of the heraldry symbols on the floor. See these symbols? While we call them heraldry, they're more than that. They tell a story. He pointed to a few symbols. Some won't help us much, as they tell about marriages and stuff. Then he pointed to others. But some tell us a lot more. If I'm right about these symbols here, they'd say the castles connect with magical corridors, so we don't have to travel the land to go between. But he's put his hand on his chin and walked around some more. But I think we have to turn on or open something. He walked around again and pointed to some more symbols. I have to read about these, but I think these help us get within the ring. He looked up at the siblings. These are stories about the people, but there's a double message. Within each story there is something more. Then suddenly he said, ah, yes, well, I didn't see everything, but light streamed from Kilty when we were in the wagon. It was very bright. But look here, he pointed and continued. It should have made a triangle. Kirsche and Kirian leaned in and looked at the triangle. Kirsche remembered on the map the T, so she didn't connect the triangle to the T, but now she saw the triangle surrounded a T. When she looked at Kirian and Kilty, it didn't seem like they saw the T. She thought with Kirian and confirmed he didn't see it. Then she thought with Kilty and confirmed that she didn't see it either. After a few minutes, Kirsche asked, so maybe there is a tunnel or something where we can bring the horse and wagon? Mr. Valens looked at Kirsche and replied, I sure hope so. Kirian interjected, but the forest inside the mountain ring is supposed to be very dense. Well, if we have to leave the horse, started Kirsche, we probably don't want to leave him in the castle. That's true, replied Kirian. They ate the rest of their lunch in silent contemplation. Before they went out to explore again, Kirsche thought to Kilty, I guess we are here to access the tunnel to get inside the mountain ring and are to turn on or open up the connections. Then she thought the same thing to Kirian. After a few days of exploring, Mr. Volans was able to interpret enough of the story to tell them what to look for to be able to find the tunnel. Still, it took a couple more days to find the entrance. Excuse me. And a few more days to be able to open it. Once it was open, they had to decide what to bring and what to leave. One matter was the horse. Kirian thought if Kirsha could shrink the horse and ride the wind to their village, someone might find it and recognize it. He felt they could buy another horse down the line or pay for the horse's care, but he was more concerned for the horse. Kirsha didn't like the idea because of the suspected sleeper thoughts in Mr. Leister, but decided that a lost horse wouldn't be any definite information. The next problem was how to get the horse out. After Mr. Volans went to sleep, Kirsha took the horse on the raft out the southern exit. She shrank both the horse and the raft. She became the wind to bring the horse just outside their village, and then she went back and used the raft to re-enter the castle. In the morning, they packed to leave. Before they ate breakfast with Mr. Volans, Kirsha taught Kirian and Kilty how to shrink things, which they somewhat already knew intuitively because of shrinking their staffs. But with Kirsha's instructions, they became more proficient. However, they still left behind many things, including the wagon. They started down the dark tunnel, but as they walked, magical torches started lighting the way. Kilty's leg bothered her, but it wasn't the worst it had ever been. Miss Brocklin was picking some flowers to dry. Then she noticed some berry bushes and decided to get some berries as well. She knew about the ravenous Vaporus, but hoped her boots would protect her. Then suddenly she heard the snort of a horse. It startled her so badly that she spilled her basket. Once she spotted the horse, she recognized it as the one Mr. Dontower had sold the kids. She immediately tried to think with Kirsha. Kirsha received, "Are you home?" Kirsha thought, "No, we are entering a tunnel. It is supposed to go through the mountains to the inner forest." Bonnie thought, "Oh, your horse is here." Kirsha responded, "Yes, we couldn't bring him in the tunnels." Bonnie asked how they got the horse here. Kirsha just told her that they released the horse. They caught each other up on their news, and then they said their goodbyes. Bonnie gathered back all the flowers and berries and then headed into the village to get her husband to help with the horse. Halfway back, she remembered the telepathy she used with her husband, so she thought to him about the horse, and he was ready to head out when she arrived back home. Suddenly, as they were walking down the tunnel, Mr. Volans exclaimed, "Oh my, look at this! These are more stories or instructions." He walked closer to the wall and examined the symbols of heraldry. Kirsha grabbed a magical torch off the wall and walked closer. After a few minutes, Kilty started telling a story as she pointed to some symbols. Then she turned to Mr. Volans and asked if she got things right. Mr. Volans chuckled and said she did. Then he said, "But I think these symbols here are the important story. The story you told was just a distraction or more ancient history." Then he pointed out some symbols and asked Kilty what they meant. Kilty was able to discern some of the symbols, but not all. Kirsha ran a hand over Kilty's head and told her she did well and that she was proud of her. After Mr. Volans finished the story, they looked for a hidden tunnel. They found it and continued after Kirsha put the magical torch back. As they walked along, the siblings thought of the cave. They walked through to the map room. That seemed so long ago. But there were hidden passages all along, and they had to go through many tunnels. It was long past night for the outside, but they didn't know that. They just knew they were tired. None of them were used to walking all day, especially since they had been riding in the wagon. At the same time, they didn't know how long they would be in the tunnels, but they decided to stop. The siblings got out their pallets and enlarged them. When Mr. Vollins looked at them in shock, Kirsche said, "Don't worry, I have some blankets from the castle for you." She enlarged them, and Mr. Vollins gratefully took them. Kirsche wondered why he hadn't grabbed blankets from Castle Southpolk, but then thought, he probably thought that was stealing. Kirsche thought, you can't really steal from the dead. But then she admonished herself and thought, some of the people might live in the ultrarium. She decided that when they got to the ultrarium and met the people, they could sort it out. They traveled through the tunnels for several days. They didn't know how many, until finally they opened what they thought was a hidden door. But then sunlight streamed in. The sun was setting, and it would be dark soon, so they closed the door and lay down to sleep in the tunnel. They would venture out in the morning. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 18. That felt like a very short chapter. We didn't see very much in the castle, but we didn't need to because the castles are mostly the same. The thing about this chapter is now all the heraldry or pictures on the floor are an interrelated event or story point. Remember all the way back to the first castle, Kirsche noticed the heraldry. She found some books. Then later she gave the books to Mr. Vollins to study. And all along people said the siblings should be traveling with a Wyseer. So now the story connected a lot of things. Mr. Vollins, a Wyseer, was traveling with them. They had the books, and he was reading them. But what was Mr. Vollins' purpose? Yes, Mr. Vollins was scared to stay in his village, and it wasn't a lot of trouble to bring him. But in the beginning of him joining, Kirsche didn't really want him coming. Some of her reason was her past interactions with him, but also some of that was her new knowledge of sleeper thoughts. Still, she let him tag along. And now the story connects him as well as the symbols on the floor. The scene I haven't really connected in this story is when the siblings woke up and something had knocked the cart over. I'm sure I had a train of thought about that, but obviously I didn't write it in, so I will have to figure it out or remove it from this story. Sometimes when I'm editing, I'm concentrating on just one aspect of the story, so I'll throw a little clue for myself of where I wanted something to go, and I'll find that tidbit on my next pass, and I'll fill out that scene or pick up the thread and carry it the rest of the way of the story. You can edit any kind of way you want and try to do all the things at one time, or you can try to just do one thing through the story. We have Microsoft Word, and you can just put your cursor anywhere and start typing, or you can say, oh, that was supposed to go up here, so you can cut this scene and put it up higher or put it lower. So we have so many options with Microsoft Word on how we can edit. So that's how I do it. I try to focus on one thing and bring it through the story, and then I'll focus on the next thing and bring it through the story. Even if it's all kind of going in my head at one time, it doesn't write very well for me when I'm writing the story. Leave a comment below on if you if you found a loose end in your story or a scene that you haven't connected. Remember, plot is the structure of interrelated actions consciously selected or chosen and arranged by the author. In other words, no loose ends and no random scenes. Everything needs to move our stories forward, and you need to connect everything. Join me Tuesday for another writing prompt or some more jargon. I think I'm going to dive deeper into perspectives. Join me Friday for chapter 19, The Inner Forest. We are getting close to the end of the story because at this point I only have 20 chapters. If you're sending chapters, do not think for a minute that your story needs 20 chapters. You might have 10 or 40 or any other number. I don't think there is a set number. It's just based on many climaxes or high points or of the story. Your story needs to complete or accomplish something. Or if you backslide, the backsliding needs to stop. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. Send your latest chapter as PDF or Word document to writewithmykela@gmail.com. Or if you haven't sent any chapters, then send your chapter 1. We want to read it. You don't have to polish it or perfect it or have everything connected at this point. This is just fun stuff. Visit my website and read about the characters in Mykela, Operatives, and City of the Ancients. My website is www.bymykela.com. That's www.bymykela.com. Leave a comment below on how many bios you've read so far, or let me know your favorite character so far. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.